Okay, can everybody hear me well? I'm seeing a raise of hands. Appreciate you being here tonight. My name is Phil Walker. I'm with the Walker Collaborative, and I want to introduce my consulting team briefly. Keith Covington with Third Coast Design Studio. Keith is a urban designer and architect. Lee Jones next to him, also with Third Coast. Lee is an urban designer and landscape architect, and Mickey Hall is next to him with Skipper Consulting. He's a transportation planner. I also want to acknowledge Brian King. Brian, you might raise your hand. Brian just earned his master's in city planning. He lives in the area and was really helpful to us over the last few days, doing all sorts of things to help out with the charrette. And also Alan Axford, who's with the Regional Planning and Development Commission, who did a great job supplying us with maps. So just wanted to kind of get that out of the way. How many of y'all were, where were we? I guess next door on Monday evening when we did the big workshop. Can I see a show of hands? Okay, quite a few folks. So the good news for those of you who have already been through a couple of these meetings is we're not going to spend much time tonight on existing conditions. I know you've all suffered through that, all the information, so we're going to just hit briefly on what all we looked at. But here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to just give you a little bit of background. The vast majority of time, though, is going to be spent actually presenting the concept plan that we've developed over the last 3 days since our session on Monday evening. And then we'll have all the time you need to ask us questions and have just an open discussion about it. And then we'll finish up just explaining what the next steps are going to be. This is the project area. You probably, if you've been to any of these, you're pretty familiar with it now. Green Street to the north, at the very south is Boundary, the river on the west, and then the east kind of varies. This is step 2 in a 4-step process. We've already been through most of the background research and analysis, which really included a lot of steps were saved because of the 2012 planning effort where things like the market analysis was performed. So here's where we are now. The next steps will be to, once we get your feedback on the general concept we've come up with, is to sit down and actually put together a very detailed plan document. And then we will present the plan when it's a little more polished and get your input yet again and then revise it. So as I said, I'm not going to go into all the detail on our findings, but these are the kinds of issues that we looked at and the stuff that we've presented in the past. We talked about what's the organizational structure. We talked about the physical characteristics, things like the topography and the floodplain and so forth, and the built environment. We looked at uses and ownership and the economic context, public policy, things like your existing zoning and your National Register Historic District. And we also looked at the historic development of the community. And we're really lucky to have maps that show from the 1830s through the ages. I want to talk a minute about the public input because, this is really critical. We all have technical expertise in urban planning, but what's important is that we hear from you so that we can then figure out how do we take your hopes for this downtown riverfront area and kind of translate that into something that can be implemented in the future. So when we did the initial kickoff meeting back in August, and I'm not going to run through all these, but you can see this list of the ideas that we got from the public as far as opportunities, things like, well, there's been a lot of planning, so at least you got a good starting point, leveraging the river and the crater, those kind of ideas. There's a lot of challenges too, things like funding will be a challenge, and implementation and those sorts of things, but we got a lot of good feedback. We also went through an exercise, as some of you will remember, of identifying what we call model downtowns, other downtowns that had some facet that we might be able to somehow utilize for Wetumpka. And here's a list of those kind of communities with some detail on, for a few of them, on what particular aspects people like. For example, Florence, Alabama, people like the walkability of it, the outdoor dining. The other night when we did our workshop, after we went through all the existing conditions, we went through this set of 12 principles, and it was a draft form at the time, but I really emphasized that if anybody had other ideas to let us know so we could adjust it, and actually I think everybody seemed to buy into this, partly because it's pretty general, pretty broad stuff, and probably tough to argue, but I want to run through it one more time briefly, because you don't go from just doing a lot of research and information gathering to putting pen to paper. You have to have some kind of bridging step, and that's coming up with some very broad principles that then will guide you to put together the detailed plan. So the 12 principles are to preserve and enhance historic and natural resources, particularly the river. Land uses should be diverse and physically integrated, and that means mixed-use buildings as well as just a mixed-use downtown in general. Buildings should have a human scale. Downtown's architectural past should be respected. In other words, saving historic buildings and not altering them in a negative way. Providing interconnected streets that are pedestrian friendly, and the term now is complete streets, not just for vehicles, but for pedestrians, bicycles, and so forth. Number 6, streetscapes should be attractive, safe, and interesting. Number 7, accommodate parking without degrading downtown's appearance and its function. Number 8, provide a generous amount of public space in a variety of forms, so you can have different types of events, different ways to use public spaces. Number 9, offer a variety of downtown housing alternatives. 10, provide a rich mixture of shopping, dining, and entertainment. 11, offer a variety of civic, cultural, and educational and recreational opportunities. And finally, number 12, and I think this is a real key one, create an environment that will allow businesses to succeed. Because at the end of the day, people come to a downtown, particularly for things inside buildings, not necessarily to see, check out new streetscape or things like that, but to go to businesses, to go to uses. So that's going to be critical, that we create an environment where businesses can succeed. For those of you who weren't at our planning exercise Monday evening, this will give you a little snapshot of it. What we did, we had a great turnout. And I'm not sure how many folks, do you know, David, what the head count was?
Probably close to 60 or 65.
Yeah, okay, 60, 65 people is a good turnout. We, after going over all the existing conditions, we broke people up into groups. There were 8 different tables, that is 8 different teams. Each team had a base map, had a bunch of markers. We walked them through an exercise of basically planning the downtown. And then at the end of that, roughly an hour and some minutes, of the sort of citizens, deputized planners, you might say, citizen planners, each team presented their ideas. And some of the key ideas I've got listed up here, and they included things like roundabouts and key intersections. There was a couple of those proposed at different points. A riverfront amphitheater, farmer's market and antique mall, riverfront restaurants, extending the greenway to Fort Toulouse, preserving historic buildings, new housing, redeveloping the streetscapes, and just more shopping and dining options. So those are the key ideas. There were a lot more than that, and if you were there, of course, you heard all the good ideas. I'm about to turn this over to, I think Keith is going to go next, and start talking about the big picture as far as the plan we've come up with. But I want to give some caveats to you to kind of keep in mind. First of all, this is our first stab at doing this concept plan. Up until Monday, we were basically information gathering, and so please keep that in mind. Everything that you see up here is stuff that we've put together since really Tuesday morning, the day after we did our workshop. The document that we're going to produce is going to be a lot more detailed than you see here. We recognize that you have a limited amount of time and you want to sit and listen to a bunch of planners. The ideas that you see, there are some that are going to be implementable fairly soon. In fact, one thing we want to look at later is what we call the Quick Victory Project. And that's identifying one thing where you can really come out of the gates with implementation that's highly visible, high odds of success. But then there are other ideas that could take 10, 20 years. It just depends on funding and how you want to sequence it and what pace you want to take. Another thing that we always try to do with our plans is to make sure there's not some kind of a linchpin idea where, if idea B isn't implemented, the rest of it somehow unravels. So that's good. If there's some part of it that maybe you're not keen with, you want us to go back and rethink, that's probably not going to be a problem. And then finally, after we get through the presentation, we're going to take all the time we need to answer your questions, and hopefully we'll have a good dialogue. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Keith.
Thanks, Bill.